Fethullah Gulen, I believe, began the Hizmet movement with education largely in mind. And it was his particular vision to develop schools and universities which concentrate on education with the modern world in mind and with international connections in mind. My name, the one my mother gave me, is Donald Beecher, and I am currently a professor of English literature at Carleton University here in Ottawa. And I specialize in literature from the Renaissance period, that is to say authors around our most famous author, Shakespeare. And not only do I teach Shakespeare theater, but I also teach other literatures of the period in relationship to continental literature, history of ideas, and now, most recently, I'm interested in the neurosciences, in cognitive sciences, and the way in which our brains and their structures and designs impinge upon the ways in which we read culture and the way in which we read literature. That was just simply a fortuitous chance that the Hizmet movement here in Ottawa had been circulating news about themselves through our university email accounts, and they were trying to attract more academics to the Hizmet movement, to the Intercultural Dialogue Institute here in Ottawa. And I received 2 or 3 of these, and at one point I said to myself, this is an interesting topic they're discussing. I should really go. I should really attend this meeting. But prior to that, I knew nothing about the movement. It was about 3 or 4 years ago now, and it was just by chance that I saw this invitation, accepted the invitation, and went to my first IDI meeting. After that, I was very quickly hooked. I liked what I saw. I liked the goals and ideals of the organization. I liked the way in which it was set up. It was before this wonderful building which we're sitting in now. This building has been built completely since the time that I became involved in the movement. And so I've been able to watch this whole development here in Canada. And I have just simply followed subsequently the activities of the organization and participated in as many of their events as I could. The Hizmet movement, do you know, it's a really remarkable conception when you think about it. It is, I think, very largely the idea of Fethullah Gülen and the Hizmet movement, which was founded on several different fronts, both educational, in terms of founding schools, in terms of developing relief organizations. But one of the wings of this movement was to open up a dialogue between the cultures and the religions of the world, simply because many of our misconceptions of each other are based on a lack of knowledge and a lack of information. And that is something which is very easy to believe in, something which is very easy to espouse. And so it's for that reason that I thought the entire movement was well-placed, well-timed, and certainly something that deserves our encouragement and our support. He is a complex individual. He is a very complex individual, a man, I think, with a remarkable perspective on the world, But he has taken, I think, quite an innovative stride in wanting to move through his own spirituality, which is absolutely based and grounded in the Islamic faith, grounded in Sufism, grounded in his studies in Muslim theology, all of these things. But out of this, he has developed an international perspective. He has developed an inter-theological, an interfaith perspective. And therefore, he, I think, has become a real intellectual leader, a real spiritual leader, now on a worldwide basis. He is admired and respected by the peoples of many faiths and many religions around the world. On the other hand, he is a man who has been drawn into many different dialogues about our world, both commercial and political, and these are more difficult for me to speak to. I have this book here called The Gulen Movement in 100 Questions, which was written by Doru Ergil, and it answers many, many of the questions about who he is, what he believes, and it's very complex. He has many, many different views on matters political, on matters economic, on matters about Turkish internal organizations and so on, about which I'm really not qualified to speak. But certainly as a world leader in intercultural discussion and in interfaith encounters, I think he's really one of the great intellectuals of our time. Fethullah Gulen and the Hizmet Movement. This is a multifaceted movement, of course, and therefore it has a number of different enterprises relating to education, relating to world relief, relating to news and journalism and the Writers' Foundation, and relating to its chapters of the Intercultural Dialogue Institute the world over. Fethullah Gulen, I believe, began the Hizmet movement with education largely in mind. And it was his particular vision to develop schools and universities which concentrate on education with the modern world in mind and with international connections in mind. So these schools, and I have visited 4 or 5 of the schools in Turkey, including Fatih University, which is a beautiful, beautiful organization. And it represents an educational institution which has its doors open to the world, to international education, which concentrates on all of the sciences and all of the humanities, but specializes in languages and specializes in the tools, the academic and cultural tools which its students need in order to make contact with the greater world. And I know that it is part of his educational vision to enable his students at the high school level to be equipped to pursue their particular special studies at universities outside of Turkey before returning to Turkey with this international experience and with this international vision. And I can only commend these schools, not only in terms of their philosophy, but in terms of their actual achievement on the ground, because I know that a number of the students from the Hizmet schools in Turkey have gone on to compete in local, regional, and national science fairs, for example, and have come away from those competitions with the highest of grades and with the highest of marks. So whatever they are doing, they seem to be doing it right. They seem to be getting a great number of things quite well. That's just simply one aspect of the Hizmet movement and one aspect of Fethullah Gulen's visions for the Hizmet movement. I have visited a number of Hizmet schools, but only in Turkey. So I do know the schools which are in Kayseri, I know the schools which are in Izmir, and we were given tours by these school principals and directors to see the programs which they have created, the technologies which they have brought into these schools for the education of these students. And there has been an emphasis in each one of these schools to try to give the students an international experience by having, particularly, for example, at Fatih University, the encouragement which is part of that university's design and structure, the bringing of students from all over the world to participate in its activities. And I think that the spirit behind this is an extension of Fethullah Gulen's interest in developing international connections, international contacts. And this can be useful not only in terms of the interfaith, intellectual encounters that we've talked about before, but also in terms of making contacts between nations on the basis of scientific investigations and the sharing of scientific interests, and also economic, also in the development of our economic contacts, so that we can encourage trade amongst our respective nations. I had the opportunity of attending only very recently here in Ottawa a day-long conference on the development of Turkish trade throughout the countries going to the east, through Uzbekistan, Kurdistan, Azerbaijan, and these countries, and the development of trade along these ways, and how Canada could become more involved in these kinds of activities. And I think one of the key places that this can certainly begin is in the university contacts which are made by bringing Turkish students to Canada to study for a short period of time, or to send our students to Turkey for short periods of time, for them to learn to work together with other cultures and other economies towards developing our trade. Interfaith activities. This, I think, has originated in Fethullah Gulen's interest in theologies of many different religions. And it is not a completely new idea to find common denominators amongst the world religions. I think of a book written in the early 17th century by Herbert of Cherbury called Pagan Religions. And in this book, he made as deep an investigation in the 17th century as he possibly could into all the religions of the Near East, as well as the religions of the North, as well as the religions of amongst the established major religions of the world, in order to reduce them all down to their fundamental and common denominators, in order to see if he could discover what was the essence, the fuse, the central core of all religions in the world. It's an interesting idea. What is religion in general? And if we can come back to the core of each one of those religions, then we have the foundations on which we can begin to talk to each other. As soon as we recognize that our religions have come out of common needs, common desires, what are those desires? What do we seek to do through our worship? What do we seek to do through our beliefs and through our faith structures? And I think this is a question which has been of real interest to Fethullah Gulen, and it's on that basis that we can come together, as we often do here in Ottawa, through the Intercultural Dialogue Institute, to bring members of the Jewish faith, members of the Islamic faith, members of Christian faith, both Catholics and Protestants, together to discuss, for example, the idea of the family. How do our respective religions see the family, and what role it plays in the foundations of our various religious aspirations, because family identity is one of the concerns of our worship and one of the concerns of our faiths. And how is the family organized? How is the family defined? That's just one aspect of it. But there are, of course, many, many other aspects in which we can discuss the commonalities between our faiths.
I was very impressed by all of the charitable work that they do, and how dedicated they are to that, and how dedicated they were to really friendship among the nations.
And I think it's Fethullah Gulen's intent to see Islam without diluting anything which has given Islam its identity, its strengths, its forms of worship, but at the same time seeing it as a world religion amongst other world religions.